Roslyn Sulcas. I'm a dance critic at the New York Times. I used to be based in New York, and 3 years ago I moved to London, and I now write about culture in London and in England and Europe from there. I still write a great deal about dance, and one of the marvelous things about moving to London has been that I've been able to follow Natalia, who has herself moved there a year ago, but we'll come to that when I talk about it. It's very, very nice to be at the Segerstrom, which I've never visited before, but knew as a name and as an important partner in many dance ventures. As it is here today in the program that you're seeing, which is, as you know, a premiere, the first time that this program, Solo for Two, has been presented, and it will go on from here to tour to Moscow, London, next year New York. And I thought I'd tell you a bit about both of the dancers, and then a little bit about the choreographers and the choreography that you'll see, and give you sort of some sense of what to expect. Natalia Osipova and Vasiliev are one of those blue moon dance partnerships that you really don't find very often, and it's a very exciting thing when you do, when you have two dancers who are both great individual artists, but somehow together are more than the sum of those parts. I think you'll see that today on stage. They have an incredible on-stage chemistry, and they complement each other in their different qualities. Osipova was born in Moscow. She's 28 now, 28 years ago. She was a very serious gymnast as a child. When I first interviewed her a few years ago, she said that her greatest disappointment in life, still at that point to date, was when at 8 years old she was told that she couldn't continue gymnastics. She had some sort of injury, and her gymnastics teacher felt it would be very unwise for her to go on. She said it was a tragedy for her. She had been incredibly focused and serious. She was absolutely sure she was going to go to the Olympics. And I think that gives you sort of an idea of her personality and character, even at that very young age, how serious and ambitious and focused she was then. And her parents actually took her to ballet classes as a sort of distraction, hoping that this would alleviate to some extent the loss of gymnastics. But she said it was a few years. She was a little bored by ballet. She didn't love it in the same way. It was not until she danced a solo in a school performance and heard the audience applauding, as she said, at that moment she suddenly realized, yes, that's what this is all about. I love this and I want to do this. And that again is a nice sort of a clue into her character. She really is this incredible stage animal, as is Vasiliev. They both seem larger than life on stage. She went to the Moscow State Ballet Academy, which is the Bolshoi Ballet sort of feeder, and was a wonderful technician even in his teens. When you look back, you can find YouTube videos and things, you can see her talent immediately. But interestingly, she did not, her entry into Bolshoi Ballet wasn't quite as kind of simple as one might think. Alastair Macaulay, who many of you will know as the associate artist, I think his title is, at American Ballet Theatre, and their choreographer, and one of the world's great choreographers, was at that point the director of the Bolshoi Ballet. And he said, he told me that he had to really fight to get her into the company, that people felt she was too gymnastic, almost vulgar in her kind of energy and enthusiasm and presence, that she wasn't classical enough in some way. But he said he looked at her, he could see the talent, he could see this incredible vitality and verve, and he insisted on having her in the company. He gave her solo roles quite quickly, promoted her, and he said she continued to be a very divisive presence amongst audiences and inside the company itself. People loved her, people hated her. She always excited a kind of passion in her who watched her work. 2 years after she joined the company, Roslyn spotted a young man, Vasiliev, at I think it's the Varna competition. He's a little young, he's 25 now. He had started ballet after going to see his elder brother, going to watch folk dance classes that his elder brother was doing. Loved it, joined in. I think after a while the teacher said to his parents, this boy's got real aptitude for movement, you should send him to ballet. And that's what happened, and he was, a wonderful prodigy in his teens, won a lot of competitions, including Varna. very prestigious big ballet competition. And Radmansky spotted him there and invited him to come to the Bolshoi. Again, in the face of opposition. It was felt that he again wasn't classical enough, that he didn't have the physique to do this sort of noble prince roles. And it's an aside worth making here that, you know, stereotypes and prejudices about bodies in ballet are not limited to women, although that's more commonly talked about. But men too are expected, certainly if they're to do the princes in Swan Lake and Sleeping Beauty and those 19th century classical roles, they're expected to be very long and lean and have sort of noble bearing. And as you'll see when you see Vasiliev on stage, he is compact and incredibly muscular, very powerful thighs, and you know a lot of has less kind of body that gives him the possibility of that incredible innovation and technique and the amazing speed that he has. But he doesn't have that sort of prince body, and that was apparently held against him at the Bolshoi and contributed to the later move. But in the meantime, Radmansky very presently saw that they would be a fine couple on stage, paired them up. They won a very devoted following at home. And when their big international breakthrough was when they went to the Bolshoi went to Covent Garden on an international tour in 2007, and he cast them as Tita and Basilio in Don Quixote on the opening night. And they went from being, you know, relatively unknown to the London critics to a sort of overnight sensation. No one could get enough of them. The very venerable Financial Times critic, Clement Crisp, who is renowned for his irascible pen, wrote something like, he wrote something like, he's saying that all the British critics have to give their reviews star ratings. It's very strange to me, but they do. They have to rate them from 1 to 5 stars. And Clement Crisp opened his review by saying, "Let us not exaggerate, but 6 stars seem to be in order." So that was his seal of approval. And he, you know, he's seen everyone from Pita to Massimo Rossi. And they won, you know, they won a instant devotion from the London public, acquired a much bigger international reputation, began to work as guest stars all over the world. And Hoover was invited to ABT, to American Ballet Theatre as a guest. A year later, they offered her a principal dancer contract, which she kept in conjunction with the Bolshoi status. In 2010, both of them were promoted to principal at the Bolshoi. And then in 2011, to everyone's utter shock, at least in the ballet world, they left the Bolshoi for the Mikhailovsky Ballet. The Mikhailovsky is a ballet company in St. Petersburg. And although it's a very good company, it's not as prestigious and it's not as large scale as either the Bolshoi or the Miralinsky. So it was a surprise to the ballet world why they'd gone there. They said that they wanted more artistic freedom. They wanted to be able to travel, to guest, to accept international invitations, and they also wanted to work with the Miralinsky's then artistic director, Nacho Duarte, who came from the contemporary dance world. So, you know, even then you can see a sort of hunger to try new things. Even Vasiliev said to me in an interview afterwards that he had felt very typecast at the Bolshoi, that he was sort of stuck to Spartacus and Don Quixote, because that's how they saw him, and he felt he could do more and he was capable of more, and that's, you know, what he was hoping for. It's worth saying at this point, when you talk about these sort of peregrinations from company to company and dancers holding joint contracts around the world, that this is sort of a new phenomenon in ballet, and I think this couple are, you know, exemplars of a generation that is much more savvy, much more ambitious about the kind of artistic experience they can have, much more convinced they can sort of have it all than previous generations of ballet dancers, where really the model was to train in a company style in a school, be it the Royal Ballet or the Paris Opera or the Bolshoi, to get into that company, to work your way up the ranks, and to really remain with that company for the entirety of your career. People guessed it, but it wasn't quite in the same way. And I think this generation, there's been a sea change in people really being exposed to much more. I think just the advent of YouTube is making an enormous difference to the dance world, because people can see all sorts of things. They can learn about other styles, other choreographers, what people are doing in other countries. And there's a hunger, I think, for this kind of international experience, for exposure to different kinds of styles. If you don't go to a lot of ballet, you may think all ballet is the same. And in a sense it is, in that there's a technique that everyone learns, and the steps are called more or less the same thing in every country. But there are huge differences between the way a Russian dancer at the Bolshoi, even between Russian dancers at the Bolshoi and Mariinsky, there are huge stylistic differences in their training. But still more so if you look at the Royal Ballet or the Paris Opera Ballet. It's one of the joys actually of watching foreign companies, is to see this very, very different way in which they perform works. And I think that dancers today are very, very hungry to have these kinds of experiences, and I think that's probably one reason why 18 months after this pair had joined Mikhailovsky, the people had announced that she was going to leave Mikhailovsky, or they both were, and she was going to join the Royal Ballet as a principal. And she said that one of the reasons was that she really wanted to be steeped in the styles of Frederick Ashton, of Kenneth Macmillan, to have the chance to work with choreographers like Wayne Brother and Christopher Wheeldon, Young Scarlett, and have those new artistic experiences. Vasiliev has continued as a principal dancer at American Ballet Theatre. He dances a lot with the Scala Ballet and is in huge demand all over the world. So you might wonder why, given all of that, they would want to do a show like this, which is an enormous amount of work. Essentially has to be both in terms of rehearsal, keeping it going, keeping it well rehearsed and looked after, and in terms of finding the time, why they would do this. And I think the answer is the one that I've already started, which is this hunger for new experience and new work. I mean, I think it's really fantastic that the program that you're seeing today is not a sort of ballet's greatest hits, which would have been an easy show to put together. They could easily have done the work that they've been doing together for the last 10 years, and would have been much, much less effort for everyone involved. But instead, they've chosen a really ambitious and I think somewhat challenging program that is wonderful, with 3 choreographers who essentially come from the contemporary dance world, although all have worked with ballet dancers and ballet companies. They are Sidi, Larbi, Cherkaoui, Ohad Naharin, and Pita. The elder statesman of the group is Ohad Naharin, who is Israeli and runs the Sheva company in Tel Aviv. He is a huge name in the contemporary dance world, one of the greats, I think. He, about 10 years ago, possibly a little more, came up with he was injured actually, and in response to the injury, he came up with a system of training and movement that he calls Gaga, not related to Lady. Well preceded Lady Gaga. He said he chose the name for its sort of silliness and its nonsensical, fun connotations. And when someone just told me that it means touch in Hebrew, touch. Yeah, which she didn't say when I asked him the question, and I haven't actually heard that elsewhere, but it's interesting. And it's quite hard to explain what Gaga is, because it's not a technique like ballet or like Indian Kathak or tap. It's a way of working which is designed to release inhibitions and to connect with your body. If any of you do yoga and you have been in a yoga class where the instructor says things like separate your ankle bone from the flesh behind it, you'll have some sort of sense of what Gaga is, drop your eyeballs down into their sockets, that sort of thing. Gaga is like that in the sense of trying to get you to differentiate between the muscles, the skin, the flesh, the nerve, to really connect with your body, and also to the pleasure in movement. And it's about a releasing of inhibitions. And I'm telling you all this because it's really important when watching the Naharin piece to know that when Segerstrom, who heads our Dani artists, and is a partner of the Segerstrom in putting this program together. When he phoned up Naharin and said, you know, this couple would really like to work with us, was that he would love to, but that he insisted they come to Tel Aviv and work with him and his company for several weeks, working on this, taking yoga classes, really understanding their style, that it wasn't a matter of simply, you know, getting into the studio and saying these are the steps and this is how you do it. It's really something that comes from the inside out. And I think knowing that, it's interesting to watch them do this. He said he was very touched by how willing they were to make themselves vulnerable in this context and to share their inhibitions and to be silly. It's very difficult for ballet dancers who are trained from a very, very young age to try to achieve perfection. That's the whole idea about ballet. As a dancer, you know it's not quite attainable, but you're always striving for it. You're striving not to show effort, to look as if everything is easy, and to be perfect in some way. And Larbi is the opposite of that. And Naharin told me that the final thing he told them when he left was, it's possible to be magnificent without being perfect. Which is very nice and good to think about when you see this piece in which there are movements that are odd and sort of atavistic and almost tribal in their ritualized quality, and that's where it all comes from. So he worked with them on material that he had already composed from a piece called Patonetto. But he said that in working with them, the piece really changed enormously because he was responsive to their qualities and vice versa. And that he said for him it's pretty much a new piece. Well, you'll see, it's a very beautiful piece, I think. The opening duet is by a Belgian choreographer called Sidi, Larbi, Cherkaoui, who has a Moroccan father and a Flemish mother. He grew up in a household that had very little exposure to the arts. He said that they never went to a museum or an opera or ballet. He didn't really know anything about it, but he always loved dancing, and his connection to dancing was through popular culture. He would watch TV and dance shows and dance to pop music. He said his father was very traditional and wouldn't let him do any kind of dance class. And he said it wasn't until he was 17 or 18 when his parents got divorced and he was living with his mother that he was able for the first time to take classes. And he's incredibly and utterly indiscriminate. He took ballet, Indian dance, flamenco, jazz, tap, African dance, whatever came his way. And I think when you look at his work, you sort of see that complete openness to anything in movement. It's quite stylistically hard to pin down. The piece you'll see is quite balletic actually, because he made the original material was made for a ballet company, and I think he's also been very responsive to this pair's amazing technical capabilities. But you also see in the movement all sorts of other elements that come from other dance techniques, and it's very seamless and silky and somehow natural and effortless in the way it comes across, although the dancers have a very complex and sort of kinetically charged obligations. The piece actually has quite a silent opening, and quite surprised when I saw it. I haven't seen work like that before. It takes you aback, but it mutates into a very beautiful and quite gentle ending. The final piece on the program is by Pita, who is much less well known in the dance world than either of the other two. If you've ever had seen his work, he's South African of Portuguese parentage. He came to London in the early 90s to study at the London Contemporary Dance School, and he then joined Matthew Bourne's company. You probably know his work, the New Adventures company. They've done Swan Lake and all manner of very successful things. And I think you see that influence in Peter's work. Like Matthew Bourne is wonderfully theatrical, has a lot of humour. Peter, I think, has a sense of really absurdist humour. People I had seen his work. He'd done a solo, I think, that he'd made. Well, initially he'd a piece he'd made for the Royal Ballet dancer Edward Watson called Metamorphosis, that was based on Kafka's novel. which was a huge success actually in London. They did it in 2010 or 11, and then again in 2012, and then it toured to New York. And when she moved to London to join the Royal Ballet, she saw the second season of that work. She was incredibly impressed by it, and she saw more work that he had done, another solo, I think, for Watson at a sort of Men in Motion, I think the program was called, in London at the Coliseum. And she said she just sort of had a feeling about him, that this was someone interesting, and also someone who was something of a director. And in this she's quite right, because in fact, his work until an early work of God's Garden, which is what this piece is based on, had actually worked a great deal in theatre and musical theatre, and hadn't made that many independent dance works. God's Garden was an early piece, it was very successful, then came the Metamorphosis Commission, which was really a big breakthrough, and subsequently he's made a few wonderful pieces, including a fantastic Midsummer Night's Dream that I saw a few months ago. And I think you'll see that this piece is quite a narrative piece. It has, although it has a dreamlike, surreal, absurdist quality to it, not a very literal narrative. And it gives, I think it gives these dancers, after two very challenging pieces by Cherkaoui and Naharin that are really very demanding technically, it gives them it shows another aspect of their artistry. Their ability, their dramatically think, their theatricality, their acting. It also actually is quite technically demanding, especially for Vasiliev. There's a wonderful solo in it, but it also gives them this other aspect to reveal. I just realized I haven't given my lecture about watching contemporary dance, which I'm now going to do, and that is, and in fact, last night when I gave the talk, I talked about it earlier because I was talking about the fact that the first two pieces on the program are essentially abstract, and that I think, and that after these piece then possibly becomes something of a light relief, because it is actually something of a story you can follow, and there's the characters in it. But what I want to say, I think often people come, especially being artists, you might thought you would possibly see something a little more balletic than it is. In this program, and I think often an obstacle to that is that people feel they don't get or understand contemporary dance. And the thing that people say to me most often when I take people with me to see dance, especially for people who don't go a lot, or sometimes someone spots me because I'm making notes, spots me as a critic and talks to me, and then what almost without there says after the performance is, now you must explain it to me. And really, that always leaves me feeling completely traumatized, because I don't understand any more than you do. And that really is true, particularly when it comes to abstract dance, which is just to say that there's nothing particular to get. There's no magic key. There's nothing that I know that you don't. It's just a matter of how open and responsive you are to it. It's like abstract art. You don't go and look at a Jackson Pollock or a Roscoe or something and go, what does it mean? You just look at it, and it may evoke feelings of association. You may hate it, you may love it, you may be impressed by the technical capacity behind it or not. But it's there for you to kind of take in and absorb. And contemporary dance is really like that too. You don't have to understand it, so to speak. You can just see it and see what happens. Okay, thank you very much.